Hello, everybody. Welcome to Zone Defense. We talk all things NBA and NFL. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and hit that subscribe button down below because it really helps out our channel a lot. Also, drop a comment and let us know which team you think won the NFL draft. Today, we'll be handing out our winners and losers from last week's NFL draft, as well as discussing the recent Aaron Rodgers trade rumors. How's it going, guys?
I'm good, Drew. I'm really interested in getting into all this. The draft, I was thoroughly entertained. There's a lot of great drafts, also a lot of bad drafts. And I'm interested in talking about it with you both.
Yeah, I agree with what Roman said. Definitely some teams that really exceeded expectations during the draft, and some, including this one team that does it every single year that I hope I end up getting to talk about, really did not perform well this year, and it's not a surprise at all. But we'll have to we'll talk about that when we get to it. But Drew, take it away, man.
Yeah, so before we jump into the draft grades, we're going to talk about this man right here, Mr. Aaron Rodgers. A few hours before the draft last Thursday, he dropped a bomb, or him and his agent or whoever did it to Adam Schefter. And it was reported that he told several people within the organization that he wanted out of Green Bay. His three desired destination teams were the Niners, the Broncos, as you all can see here, and the Las Vegas Raiders. He's also talked about possibly retiring if the Packers don't trade him. He's also said he could go back to the Packers if they fire their GM, Brian Gutekunst. So lots of different things to unpack here. I'm sure this will be a storyline we'll talk about several times on this show throughout the offseason until something actually happens, whether it be a retirement, whether it be a firing, whether it be a trade. Who knows? But it's pretty wild. This is the defending MVP, one of the best quarterbacks ever. He might be going West Coast. There's some rumors maybe it's involved because of his new fiance, Shailene Woodley. They were up, mucking it up last weekend at the Kentucky Derby. So again, lots of different storylines here. And I think that's exactly what a guy of, no offense, of Aaron Rodgers' ego. I think he likes when people are talking about him. I think that's kind of why he did that. But whoever wants to go first, take it away here and just where do you think he's going to end up? What were your thoughts when you heard this news? What do you guys think?
I'll start it off. I'm not surprised at all. I think the Packers have done a poor job of giving him a chance to win the Super Bowl. I think he's I think he's helped this roster overperform what they actually are. Personally, he's had Devontae Adams the last few years, but they really have not given him any skill position players outside of that. Their wide receiver 2 the last few years has been an absolute bomb every single year. And of course, now that he's in trade rumors, they draft Amari Rodgers, which would be their clear cut wide receiver 2 now, in my opinion. So I think it's just been, I think the organization's handled this really poorly, and I don't blame it at all for wanting to get out for sure, because I'm sure there's plenty of other teams that would want to have him as their quarterback, including the team that I'll predict him to go to, the team that he's got the jersey on. It's the Denver Broncos. I think this makes the most sense for both sides. The Broncos are they're in the AFC, so they don't, the Packers don't have to worry about playing him a lot. I think they have enough capital and young players where, Drew Lock plus maybe another young player and some picks would probably get the deal done. And I think this gives Rodgers a ton of weapons at his disposal, because I think their wide receiver core with Sutton, Judy, and also having Noah Fant and then Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams now gives them a good weapon room for Aaron Rodgers to work with. So I think this trade would make sense for both sides, and this would make the Broncos an instant contender, in my opinion.
Yeah, the Broncos certainly left the door open for this kind of trade, considering they went with Patrick Surtain at 9 instead of a guy like Justin Fields. So I think they're definitely entertaining it. There were rumors that a deal was pretty much already in place, but I think that kind of fizzled out. So who knows where they're in terms of trade talks. In terms of the Packers and Rodgers, I think that this has been brewing for multiple years now, even before they took Jordan Love. And I think, obviously, there were rumors that he wants Brian Gutekunst fired, their GM. People have come on saying that's not true, although if it was, and if you had to choose between the GM and Rodgers, I think you have to choose Rodgers, obviously. So hopefully they get it worked out. I mean, there's obviously some miscommunication during all of this. They didn't even tell Rodgers they are taking Love. Or cutting Jay Kumro for that matter, which is another big moment that came up yesterday. And apparently he wants an extension while they want to restructure it, and just like it's all over the place. So I think there's more than a 50% chance he ends up on another team going into next season, whether it's the Broncos. It's definitely not the 49ers at this point, considering they just took Trey Lance. The Raiders has been getting more traction. I think he'd be a decent fit there. They have some young weapons and a decent up and coming defense. So it's possible. I mean, either way, whoever, if it's the Broncos or the Raiders, it'll be difficult to even make it out of the division considering they have Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. So it's going to be much more difficult than it would be in the North. But if you are in the NFC North, you are celebrating the news heavily. As I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but the Lions, Bears, and Vikings should be very happy if he does get shipped off.
Agreed.
Yeah, and honestly, like, would it really be the wrong move for the Packers if they move off of Rodgers and they don't fire the GM? I mean, the GM, yes, I know he should have talked to Jordan Love about, talked to Aaron Rodgers about drafting Jordan Love. That's controversial, obviously. He's made some questionable picks, but he's also built the roster that, yes, I know the receivers aren't great, but the defense was solid last year. They still got Devontae Adams. They still had a solid offensive line. They had a decent draft, I think, judging by most grades. They had a pretty solid draft. This isn't an awful GM by any means. And Aaron Rodgers is he's getting up there in age. He's obviously, I'm so sick and tired of hearing about this, but he's also got the Jeopardy thing.
His career is in jeopardy, Drew.
Yeah, yeah. And it seems like he's got other kind of things. And I know everyone's like, oh, well, Tom Brady's 45 and he's still playing football. I don't think Aaron Rodgers, to be honest, loves football enough to keep playing. And that's just, obviously I don't know Aaron Rodgers personally. So that's just at least my opinion, is it seems like he's got other things he wants to do. So I don't think he's going to be playing football for that much longer. So if the Packers are like, okay, man, you don't want to be here anymore, trade him to Denver, get Drew Lock or get Teddy Bridgewater and a crap ton of picks, probably Patrick Surtain, because that pick was kind of weird because the cornerback was a really strong suit for that team, and they took one with a top 10 pick. So do that, go to Vegas, trade him there for Derek Carr and a bunch of picks. Maybe their high first round pick, Alex Leatherwood, that everyone loved. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of different routes that the Packers could go. And I think they'd still be in a really good spot with a bunch of picks, with a bridge quarterback. Or like if Jordan Love, I mean, there's people that call him Paxton Lynch. Obviously, he didn't have a good career. There's people that call him Patrick Mahomes, that call him Justin Herbert, that call him all these dynamic quarterbacks. I mean, that's a wide end of the spectrum. We really don't know anything about this guy. If he's as good as people think he is, or at least the Packers think he is, I mean, you get rid of Rodgers, then you have your next beautiful quarterback for years to come. So if I was the Packers, if you're confident in Jordan Love, and I think you have to be at this point because it doesn't seem like Rodgers wants to stay there, I would say, Aaron, it's been great. You know, we only won one Super Bowl, but hey, trade him for a bunch of stuff, and then just either have a bridge quarterback or just have to give Jordan Love the keys to the kingdom right now. And that's at least my opinion. I also don't. I mean, Aaron Rodgers. He's just a big sideshow, I feel like, and I think Green Bay. I know, Chris, you said, hey, they should have done more to help him win. Yes, but I also think some of it falls on him. I mean, he's always got this just media circus around him nonstop. I think he likes the drama. He likes the attention. That's why he's dropping this on draft day when everyone's already really excited for the draft, and he turns the spotlight right back on him. So I think if you're Green Bay, I'm not a Packers fan, obviously, but if you're Green Bay, I think that the best move is to get rid of him rather than fire the GM and everything. That's at least my opinion.
I can.
Oh, we can go, Chris.
No,
and to play devil's advocate, just again, I mean, like they had the wide receivers, Cobb, Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams. Those weren't even first round picks, and I think Amari Rodgers was an excellent pick as well. So they are giving him weapons. They haven't gotten him anything anytime soon, but they've had weapons even though they haven't come in the first round. But like you said, Drew, Jordan Love is the biggest mystery in sports. I said this before we recorded. If he's good enough, then yeah, you can move on from him. I would still give him one more year to get ready. Yeah. I mean, he was on the scout team last year. He didn't even dress for any of the games. So I think you need actually one more year of preparation before you can start him. So whether it's keeping Rodgers or like you had a bridge quarterback.
Trade him to Denver. Get the bridge of all waters, Teddy Bridgewater. Just get him there.
Yeah.
Here we go.
I ultimately don't think you can start Love this year. If he's ready, then that's good. But I mean, no one's gotten a chance to see him. There was no preseason last year. The media weren't allowed at practices, so no one knows what he looks like. But ultimately, there is some hesitancy to even want to trade Rodgers. So it might be a sign that Love is not ready. So I'm interested in seeing what they do. And clearly, they still have a window to win now. They brought back Aaron Jones, who many thought was going to leave. Kenny Clark, they extended Bakhtiari. They're definitely putting Rodgers in a place to win, and they can definitely do it again if they wanted to. They just need Rodgers back. And if they had Love with these weapons, I think it's kind of shifting the timeline a little bit and maybe kind of because they're already in a bad cap situation as well. So they definitely need Rodgers to stay at least one more year to make it actually worth it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you guys think if he gets moved to Denver, does his fantasy value as a quarterback increase or decrease going from Green Bay to Denver? I'm not talking about just the weapons, more just for his fantasy value. Where would you rather him stay if he was your quarterback?
I would say personally, I think it would increase a little bit. They don't have Denver doesn't have the high end weapon like a Devonte Adams on their team, but they got Cortland Sutton coming back. They got Noah Fant. They drafted Javonte Williams. They got a really good offense there. And also, I would also add that the AFC West, I think there's going to be a lot of high scoring games if he goes there. With the Chiefs obviously there, the Chargers made a lot of really good moves in the offseason. The Raiders will still be a contender. So I think if I'm a fantasy person, I don't want him to go to Las Vegas because I do think that's a downgrade from Green Bay. But I think Denver would be a significant upgrade. And I think, I would, if I'm a fantasy manager like you are, Chris, where you have Aaron Rodgers on your dynasty team, I'd want him to go to Denver and not go to Vegas.
I think it's an upgrade. I think either way. I think that, I mean, looking at Tom Brady, I thought he was going into a much tougher division and ended up doing quite well too. So I think Rodgers can see the same thing. More weapons all over the field, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and a good defense as well. And like you said, Drew, there's going to be a lot of high-scoring games, considering they have to play Mahomes twice a year no matter what, Herbert twice a year. I think he can definitely be a good, viable option for fantasy teams.
I guess the one devil's advocate could be for him staying in Green Bay with that the competition's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Which that could be a good thing for fantasy because it's easier to put up a bunch of points, but it could also be a bad thing if they're up by like 40 points going into the third quarter and he's benched for the last half of the game and he doesn't get you more points. So that could be the thing to keep in mind. But I think overall, I think Denver would be for fantasy at least, would be the best spot for him to go.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I mean, you look at the Packers, they got Adams, they got Aaron Jones, but other than that, not a lot of plus weapons on that team. If he goes to Denver, he can spread the ball a little bit more. He's got a couple reliable pass catchers out of the backfield. He's got Noah Fant, a much upgraded tight end, in my opinion, as well. So I would agree. I think it would at least be a neutral move for him to move there. But I agree with all the higher scoring games and stuff. Them being maybe trying to fight a little bit harder in more games. I think he would probably be at least more consistent in fantasy, if not just overall better. But, I figure we need to bring that up because I think he's going to be a very interesting topic if he ends up getting moved in the offseason, where people are going to draft him or, where people see him on the spectrum of quarterback rankings.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, when we first started this conversation, I think it's going to be something we talk about for the rest of the offseason, maybe into the actual NFL season, depending on if he doesn't actually get traded and he doesn't retire. So definitely something to keep an eye out for. But we're going to hop into the actual NFL draft now, which was first round was Thursday night. And then obviously the following rounds were Friday and Saturday. We've got a chance to look at all the draft boards, and we're going to go through give one of our winners as well as one of our losers. And I believe Chris is going to start us off here with his winner of the draft.
Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward, and then obviously you probably could have seen this one coming. It is the Lions division rival, the Chicago Bears, are the clear number one winner, in my opinion, of the entire NFL draft. And this might maybe that's a little bit of a hot take because there really isn't a ton to talk about with their draft. But the fact that they were able to trade up and get Justin Fields, only giving up one other first-round pick, plus the first they got rid of this year, which ended up being Kadarius Toney. Not really a big deal in my opinion. And then also trading up to get Tevin Jenkins, who kept falling to the second round. I think the offensive tackle should have been a first-round pick. There was multiple linemen that were taken before him that I was kind of puzzled by, including the team that I don't think had a very good draft, which we'll see if I end up getting to talk about them myself or have to talk about them through one of you two. But, I think the Bears, other than that, there really isn't a lot to say about the draft. They also were able to get Daz Newsome late in the draft, so I think that's an interesting pick as well. I think he's an explosive receiver, so we'll see if he can make an impact for them in the late rounds. But I really think the Bears getting Justin Fields, finally getting a franchise quarterback of the future, getting him to fall all the way to the double digits and not having to give up an arm and a leg for him, only a couple first-round picks, which I think is very worth it for their team. I think this is an extremely good move by them, and I think this instantly raises their ceiling. I think they become a championship level contender potentially, even if Justin Fields works out like I think he will, and they're able to sign Allen Robinson through a couple more seasons. I think this team's defense is good enough to be a championship level if Justin Fields can really perform because I think he's a really good quarterback. If he performs and works out the way I think he will, I think the sky's the limit for this team, and I think the Bears really, really raise their ceiling with these couple of trades or a couple of trading up and moving up for Fields and then Jenkins, boosting both their offensive line and quarterback, which are probably their two weakest positions. So, not whole lot to add with that. Wasn't crazy about the rest of their draft. It was fine. It didn't really matter. It was just kind of irrelevant. But these two moves that they made, I think, make them a clear winner of the draft.
Yeah, I completely agree. They won the draft within the first two picks alone. Obviously, trading up to get Fields, though there were rumors that Minnesota was going to trade up and get Fields. Chicago put together the right package to get him, which is, I think, good enough incentive for Allen Robinson to return in the future. So having Robinson back, they got a receiver too. They have a couple of young ones on the roster already. And then giving Tevin Jenkins in the second, who I was hoping would go to Cincinnati because they didn't get enough OL line help for Burrow. But either way, I think that was a big steal in this draft in the second round. Like I kind of mentioned, the rest of the draft was nothing really to talk about. But the first two picks alone, I think it's definitely worthy to putting them into the winning conversation. Does it make them a division contender? I mean, it depends how early Fields starts, right? I think they're going to go into it thinking that Dalton will be the starter week one. Who knows how long he'll be there for? I think, we will see Fields at some point this year. And if they're not out of the hunt already, I think they can definitely make some noise in the playoffs if they were lucky to get in.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys mentioned it there. Like the later picks weren't like home runs by any means, so they didn't have a third or a fourth rounder. So I think that kind of takes them out of the conversation of like the clear-cut winner, but they're still a winner, obviously. Getting Justin Fields, hopefully that's the quarterback that they've needed. I mean, they haven't really look at the Bears quarterbacks throughout history. Not a lot there. Jay Cutler, I've seen his name around as one of the best Chicago quarterbacks ever. Whenever Jay Cutler's in greatest of all time conversations, you need a better quarterback. So I think Justin Fields could easily be that guy. Getting him at pick 11 too, I mean, that's awesome for them. And also they needed help on the offensive line. Tevin Jenkins, that's a guy that I think most of us had going in the first round, I think, in both of our mock drafts. So getting him in the early second round is awesome. And then they also needed to address their cornerback. They did get Thomas Graham Jr. out of Oregon in the sixth round. They could probably address that need a little bit more. But overall, yeah, great draft. Not too much to add. Hopefully, Justin Fields, it works for him there. I mean, Chicago's all in. I don't know if you guys have seen their Instagram page. It's literally just Justin Fields, Justin Fields, Justin Fields, Justin Fields, Justin Fields. So they're all in. Hopefully, Fields is all in too. I feel like he's got a chip on his shoulder. I mean, he was like 1B to Trevor Lawrence's 1A throughout their high school and college careers. And then all of a sudden, these last couple months, he went from being the fourth guy off the board, sometimes the fifth guy off the board in some mocks. So he's probably got to have a chip on his shoulder. I think hopefully he does. As a Lions fan, I don't want him to succeed. And also as a Michigan fan, I don't want him to succeed because he went to Ohio State. But I think it's a really good match for him and for Chicago, hopefully. And he's also got some good weapons there. In Allen Robinson, they got a solid defense. So I don't know how well Chicago is going to compete this year, but if Aaron Rodgers gets traded, and I mean, I think it's pretty much anyone's division, really. Even the Lions, dare I say, the Lions could maybe sneak out and win some games in that division. So we could maybe see a Justin Fields in the playoffs. Who knows? But yeah, overall, really good draft there for the Bears. And they're a team that desperately needed it too. Sorry. GM, Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy, they were both going to get fired probably if they didn't have. They might still get fired. Who knows? But this was at least a step in the right direction. But sorry to cut you off there, Roman.
No, yeah, they did that to save their jobs. I'm glad you brought that up. And if this doesn't work out, then they're both going to be gone by the end of this year. But
might be good. They might be fired anyway. Who knows?
Yeah. I'll go into my winner now. A team that unfortunately had to ship off their star tackle before the draft, Orlando Brown Jr. I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens, who they had some clear-cut needs going into the draft: wide receiver, an edge, offensive lineman. Now that they had Brown gone, and they addressed them all within their first three picks. Obviously, Rashad Bateman, wide receiver at Minnesota, they got him at the 27th overall, and then even got Tylan Wallace, who some consider a steal, in the fourth round. There's no more excuses for Lamar Jackson at this point. He has his weapons now. Whether they'll actually be viable in the offense for fantasy purposes, probably not, but at least they have the weapons there to give him what he needs, and hopefully he airs it out a little bit more. Also, with their second first rounder, they got Odafe Owe, edge out of Penn State, who obviously we've had him mocked in the first round a couple of times in our draft, so I think it's a good pick there. And then their third round pick, they got Ben Cleveland, offensive guard of Georgia, who kind of just slots into where Orlando Brown was. And then they're basically going to revamp that offensive line. There's a couple free agents still on the market who I expect them to go after. Alejandro Villanueva has been rumored to go there. So maybe just filling the absence of Orlando Brown maybe won't be as big of an impact or big of a loss they expect it to be. But overall, they was home run picks, their first three. And they got Sean Wade in the fifth. And Ben Mason in the fifth as well, fullback / tight end. So overall, I think they had a great draft, hit some very valuable needs, and I think they're going to be much better going to the year.
Look, I have, this is independent of the draft, and I don't know if you totally meant this, but this is, in my opinion, one of the dumbest opinions out there is that Lamar Jackson. What does he have to prove, man? The guy's already won an MVP, and he had a great season last year. I don't think. I don't understand this no excuses thing that you said, I guess, if that makes sense. I like he's been really good so far throughout his career. Yeah, maybe they haven't performed in the playoffs so far, but I don't think this draft really changes anything. He's still been one of the best quarterbacks in the league over the last few seasons. This team has been very good. They've just fallen a little short in the playoffs, which I can agree with. I think they definitely need to step it up in the playoffs. But yes, I 100% agree that this draft class was awesome, and they did a great job getting Sean Wade even in the later rounds, getting him, and obviously giving Lamar a wide receiver one as well, and Rashad Bateman, and then Tylan Wallace also is a good piece as well. But I just don't really understand that what he's really. I mean, he hasn't really done anything wrong in my opinion. I mean, the guy won an MVP. He also. Last year played very well, and they also won a playoff game last year. I think this year they're right in the same spot where they're going to compete for the Super Bowl again, and they may fall short again. But I think Lamar Jackson has proven all he needs to prove, that he's one of the better NFL quarterbacks in this league.
I'll hop in right there. Sorry, Drew, but yeah, I think definitely many people have criticized him for his passing ability. I mean, his running ability is no question about it, and like you said, he really has nothing else to prove. He's an MVP. However, many people either blame Lamar on the bad passing game or the below average weapons that he had. And I guess there's no excuses in terms of the Ravens front office now that they actually brought in those weapons. And hopefully we don't see as many problems in the passing game as there were in the past. So that's what I kind of meant by it. And hopefully, obviously, he's already kind of at the top of his game, but I think he can elevate himself even more considering they have Bateman, they have Wallace, they actually have weapons now. So that's kind of what I meant by that. And I expect him to be a lot better because of it.
Yeah, that's fair for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think the struggles in the passing game, I don't think it's directly led to their struggles in the playoffs, but I think it played a part. I mean, if you can throw the ball, hopefully. And that's also, I mean, even he's such a dynamic runner, but he was banged up a few times last season too. So if they can throw the ball more, he can take a little more pressure off and hopefully maybe prevent some injuries on Lamar's side as well. But yeah, overall, I don't have too much to add. You guys touched on most of it there. Really good draft for them. Helped their defense out. Got two. I mean, Bateman, I think, Chris, you had him as the second best receiver in the class, I think, if I remember correctly. And I think Roman and I both had him as the fourth best receiver. So getting him there late in the first is awesome. And also Tylan Wallace, too, is also a really good mid-round, possibly sleeper pick there out of Oklahoma State. So I don't have too much to add. Does anyone else have anything more to add about Baltimore, or I can hop into my winner? So I'm going to kind of cheat here because I was expecting one of you guys to take one of these teams. But so my teams, it's actually my two second favorite teams behind the Lions are my winners, the Patriots and the Cleveland Browns. So I'll start with the Patriots. Getting Mac Jones at 15 without having to trade up is just awesome. I hated Mac Jones at number 3 to the Niners. They put way too much pressure on him. But him at 15, going to New England, I think it's perfect situation, perfect player there. I mean, the Tom Brady comparisons are all over the internet. It's there, man. So am I saying he's going to win 6 championships? No, but his could be a possibly like a Joe Montana to Steve Young that we saw in the 80s and the 90s, where Joe Montana won a ton of Super Bowls. Then Steve Young comes in, has a good career, wins the Super Bowl. That could be Mac Jones, has a good career, maybe wins a Super Bowl or two. I think he's the perfect fit here. You got the Nick Saban, Bill Belichick connection. absolutely love it. And then they also got Christian Barmore in the second round. I think he was in the first round in one of our mocks, and he was in the first round in another one of our mocks. He's got some character problems, but hopefully he goes to New England, fixes those. I think he's a really talented player, can really help the defense. They got Cameron McGrone later as well, out of Michigan, linebacker. Overall, I just really love their draft. They got their opt-outs coming back too. Everyone thought the Patriots were dead last year, including myself, and I hate to break it to you guys, but I don't think they're dead. I think the AFC East is going to be a really fun division. You got the Pats, you got the Jets, who also had a really great draft. They were my honorable mention behind the next team I'm also going to talk about, as well as the Bills, obviously almost made it to Super Bowl last year, and the Dolphins up and coming too. I think the AFC East is going to be an absolute dogfight, going to be really fun to watch. And then my other team, I got their stuff on right now, the Browns. Getting Greg Newsome the second. I had him as like the third best corner, I believe. I think you guys had him as the fourth behind Caleb Farley. Yeah. So getting him late in the first is awesome. And then they also got Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, which I think is hilarious because I couldn't pronounce his name for the entirety of our draft coverage. And then the Cleveland Browns take him. So, and he dropped. I know there were some health concerns there, but he dropped like a rock. They got him in the late second round. He was a guy that was in both of our mocks and all of our mocks. And I also think we had him in the top 22. So getting him at pick 52 overall, the second round is awesome. They also got Anthony Schwartz to help the receiving core. I think Cleveland had just really knocked it out of the park as well. And I think I think it's them and Baltimore there in the AFC North. I think they're the two top teams in that division. And I think this draft really helped them out as well. So those are my two winners. I think the Browns, Patriots knocked it out of the park and had great drafts.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think both are definitely in my top five. I had Baltimore down as a potential team to talk about if I couldn't talk about the Bears as well as the Browns. But I also think the Patriots, maybe a little bit lower for me, probably around 5 or so. But to me, it was mostly just about the Mac Jones pick being a really good pick. After that, wasn't crazy about their draft, but I do like the McGrone pick late. I feel like they always take one of those Michigan linebackers really late in the draft. I feel like that's a very common New England Patriots pick. So he'll probably end up making a decent impact rookie year. But definitely with the Browns, I really like Newsome, getting JOK, getting Anthony Schwartz. I think all three of those picks were really good picks. And the Browns are going to be good this year, man. I think they're going to compete for a Super Bowl. And just about if Baker can take another step here. And I think, it's a minor move, but I think Anthony Schwartz can they needed one of those speed guys on the outside. They didn't really they got OBJ, still obviously pretty fast. They got Jarvis Landry, more of a possession guy, but they really were missing that deep down the field threat in Anthony Schwartz, even with their running back core. Chubb, he's kind of a home run hitter in terms of getting 20 yards, but he's not like the fastest running back in the league. And then Kareem Hunt, neither is he. He's not someone that just takes an 80-yard run every single play. So I think getting Schwartz really, raises the ceiling for this offense if he can make an impact rookie year. Then getting Newsome and JOK can really bolster that defense as well. That was, not terrible last year, but definitely the weak link of the team, in my opinion. So I think they addressed some major needs, and now they're ready to compete for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, you pretty much touched on it. For the Patriots, Drew, you were pretty ecstatic during your live reaction on our Twitter. So that was nice to see. And obviously, Bill Belichick likes his Michigan men, so that the McGrone pick didn't necessarily surprise me. Also, trading up to get Barmore over a couple teams who needed them, aka the Lions, who ended up taking Levi Onwuzurike. The Barmore pick, we mocked him in the first round, I think, in one of our drafts. Yeah. But getting that was a good pick. And like you said, Drew, the opt-outs coming back in, their defense is going to be pretty solid. The Browns, I never really thought about corner as a big need for him. When I saw Azeez Ojulari still on the board, I thought, oh, maybe that's the pick for them. Turns out he was jobbing with some injury concerns as well. But Greg Newsome, a lot of people like him. He's growing on me. So I think he'll pair well with Denzel Ward and Greedy Williams, who hopefully is back and healthy this year. And JOK, a huge dropper with injury concerns. I'm glad he eventually got taken, rightfully so, by the Browns, who I think also have a good linebacking core as well with Mack Wilson and him together, and maybe others who I'm missing. But Anthony Schwartz is good. Richard LeCount, I think, is a good safety. He'll pair well with Grant Delpit. And I think overall they had a very solid draft. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I think we'll probably do some sort of off-season overall grades more so when we do our team or division previews later in the summer. But I think also with the Browns, they also got Jadeveon Clowney too, who I think is a bit overrated, if I'm
Right,
being
right.
honest. But adding him as a complementary piece to a defense with Myles Garrett already on it, I really like that fit as well. So, yeah, I think those two teams did really good. And I also want to just briefly mention the Jets too. It was one of my honorable mentions. They also, I think, had a really nice draft, getting Zach Wilson, Elijah Vera Tucker, and all those
Two
Elijah
Michael
Moore.
Carters.
Yeah, the two Michael Carters, all that good stuff. So I'll hop now into the losers. I'll do my first loser. It's actually a player, so I'm going to shake it up a little bit here.
Wow.
This is a guy who I've heard. He was kind of whispered as, oh, what's the future for this guy after this draft? So his team actually had a really solid draft, talking about the Minnesota Vikings. They traded down from the Jets, got Christian Darrisaw, a guy we hit in the top 20. And then they also got Chaz Surratt out of North Carolina. They had a ton of picks. Wyatt Davis at Ohio State. They had a really nice draft. They needed to address the offensive line and the defense. They did just that with all their picks. But I want to mainly focus on the pick. They had their second overall pick. It was their first third-round pick. They took Kellen Mond, the quarterback out of Texas A&M, and he's not the loser. I think the loser is the quarterback who is currently there in Minnesota, Mr. Kirk Cousins. And the reason being is, for whatever reason, it just seems like this guy, and Chris, you're a Michigan State fan, so maybe you know more about this than I do, but people just don't like him, and I don't really understand why. He seems like kind of a nice guy. I don't know. But people just don't like him for whatever reason, and it seems like Minnesota was kind of done with him. You look at his stats the past few years, Kirk has been a pretty solid quarterback, slightly above average, I would say, but they're taking this quarterback, Kellen Mond. He's still a developmental project. And I mean, it's make or break time here for Kirky. I mean, he's got to win the big games, lead Minnesota, because he was looked at being like the final piece of the puzzle when he went there and signed that massive deal a few years ago. And they've made the playoffs, I think, once in the 3 years, and they lost to San Francisco in the first round. Or no, they upset New Orleans, and then they lost to San Francisco in the divisional round, if I remember. But the other 2 years, they haven't made the playoffs at all. They were really bad last year. And it's looking like they haven't agreed on a contract extension. It's looking like this might be Kirk Cousins' make or break year, and he's really on the hot seat. And it's worrisome. And also, I mean, again, going back to the people just don't like him, Robert Griffin III, who Kirk Cousins did replace, was doing some draft coverage with Bleacher Report. He was just trashing Kirk Cousins, talking about like this dude's been cashing big checks with a bunch of 7 and 9s and 8 and 8 seasons, like just dogging him that way. Talking about how Kellen Mond was going to immediately replace him, and he did everything. Kellen Mond can do everything Kirk Cousins is awful at, and all this. He's just going in on him. And it seems like, for whatever reason, the teammates, the vibe around Kirk Cousins isn't great. The fans in Minnesota are kind of done with him, it seems like, as well. He's obviously got paid a ton of money, and he hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been worth that contract. And they get a guy like Kellen Mond, who I think we all kind of had as our the next best quarterback. Him and Kyle Trask right there as the next best quarterbacks after the Big Five. And I think it's worrisome if you're Kirk Cousins. So that's why I wanted to bring him up as a loser, because I think if they get off to a slow start, if he gets off to a slow start here, I mean, we could be looking at Kellen Mond giving some more energy to Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, because they got some pieces there on offense, and they had a good draft. Maybe Kellen Mond starts by Thanksgiving, who knows? But I think this is a big make or break year for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I can't say I disagree with you. The guy's making a ton of money. I'm not really sure why people hate him, because I think he is a decent quarterback, at least, like you said, above average in my opinion. But people just trash this dude for no reason. I mean, I wouldn't say no reason, but they love to hate him, and I think they just want him gone. No one in Minnesota really likes him. I don't know why, but I mean, you don't draft Kellen Mond for no reason. I mean, this guy was a borderline first-round pick in some drafts that I saw, some mock drafts. So, I mean, getting him in the third round, extreme value, but doesn't really discredit him. Getting drafted in the third round doesn't discredit his talent. I think this guy's got a borderline first-round talent, and in some other draft classes, he probably would have been a first-round pick. But, this one, obviously a lot of the teams that needed a quarterback were able to address it. And then teams like the Vikings end up taking these high upside backups that I think Mon will end up taking over potentially after this season if Kirk Cousins doesn't perform extremely well. I think he has to take a massive step forward. But, for Cousins, I agree that he is a loser in this because now he has pressure on him behind him. He's never really had quarterback controversy behind him. So I think this will be the first time that he's actually got a legitimate threat to his job. And I think it's going to be tough for him, man, for sure. I think this is definitely a good pick for a loser in this in this NFL draft. Definitely something I wasn't expecting, but it was a good pick.
And I'll just reiterate again. I mean, there were rumors that the Vikings wanted to trade up to get Justin Fields, so maybe they had a plan of finding the replacement to Kirk Cousins in the future. So you don't draft a quarterback that early if you're not going to use him at all. So I do think Mon may be the future in Minnesota. And just to go back to the RG3 video, I thoroughly enjoyed that. It was hilarious. But he has some good points. I mean, Kellen Mond, he has the arm strength, and he's also more mobile than Kirk Cousins is. So, I mean, that's the kind of quarterback you envision. That's kind of like the mold nowadays. Maybe RG3 was a little salty that he got replaced in Washington, but ultimately, I think he made some good points. I do think Kirk Cousins could be on the it could be the odd man out in the next few years, especially because he's underperformed. I think, especially compared to his contract. So
Yeah.
I definitely think he has some. He's on notice now compared to what he had, because normally he was just chilling, had no competition, as you guys mentioned, just I don't know, collecting checks. I don't really not like that term.
That's what RG3 said.
Yeah, but yeah, it's interesting. So I'm wondering to see how that kind of works out, the dynamic between Mond and Cousins going into the season. But I do like Mond as a quarterback, and I think he ends up in a good situation. And I'm interested to see how it pans out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't have too much to add. I think it's going to be an interesting storyline to watch. The next couple of years, I think Cousins has 2 more years on his contract. So, and I think that was the big fully guaranteed thing too. So they're probably not going to cut him either. So we'll have to just wait and see. But Roman, how about you get into your loser of the draft?
Yeah, my loser. I mean, this team had a decent draft. I think they got good players. I just don't feel excited about it, and I don't think they even hit the points of need on their team. And that's the Los Angeles Rams. They lost a lot of good players in free agency. John Johnson, the safety, Troy Hill, the cornerback, Austin Blythe, the center, Michael Brockers, a DT. And they did kind of replace those guys a little bit, but didn't even draft one offensive lineman who what I thought was the biggest need of all. Because obviously you got to protect Stafford. He already has enough weapons with Woods and Jefferson and Cup, and they do get Tutu Atwell, who I think will complement those three. But they didn't even draft one single offensive lineman. They get a safety. They drafted one cornerback in the 4th round, Robert Rochelle, who I don't even know if he'll even be a good replacement or not. And obviously their defense was not the issue. There's no problem on defense. And yes, they did lose some players, so they do have to replenish that. But they also have an offensive line who was also makeshift and rackety all of last year. That was their big point of emphasis. That's kind of why Wolford had some struggles. That's why Goff got hurt, because he wasn't protected. So I do think that should have been a more point of emphasis, and they didn't attack it well. And I mean, overall their class is fine. It's decent. They have good players. I just don't feel excited about it. And I think Rams fans can agree that they didn't even focus on their points of need more than just maybe going best player available or just taking players that they just were interested in. But to me, it doesn't seem like they were filling the points of need. I think they'll still go into the season with some of those struggles they had from last year.
Yeah, I mean, look, with this team, I mean, I don't know, man. They didn't really – I kind of agree with you, but at the same time, they didn't have a ton of draft capital to begin with. So it's kind of hard to really get those high-level replacements in the offensive line if you don't have a first-round pick, because some of those other guys after that are kind of just a crapshoot. Tutu Atwell, I will say, I think was a definite reach in the NFL draft. I don't think he should have been taken that early, and I also don't think they desperately needed a wide receiver. But Van Jefferson didn't really do a whole lot last year, so maybe they felt a little bit differently about that wide receiver 3 with Stafford coming in. They're like, all right, let's give him a guy that can absolutely turn on the burners. And he's a little slot receiver, really small, the smallest receiver in this class.
I mean, they took 3 wide receivers too.
They took a couple other guys.
So.
Yeah, they did take a couple other guys, but Atwell's the one I want to focus on the most, just because he was the 2nd-round pick. But the guy's an absolute burner. He's super small, but he could give Stafford a downfield weapon. But it's not going to matter if they can't protect him, and I think that's definitely an issue. Been an issue with the Rams the last few seasons is their offensive line. It was a little bit better last year, especially during they really did a good job run blocking for Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson throughout the season. I thought they really did a good job last year doing that. But I didn't think their pass protection left something to be desired a little bit. So I'm not really making any upgrades, pretty much going with the same unit. Those players are going to have to improve in the passing game for sure to give this team a legitimate chance to win a Super Bowl. So, while I don't think this was the biggest loser of the draft, it definitely wasn't a great draft. Probably in my bottom 10 for the draft class, but it probably wasn't a team I was really considering to talk about today. I guess I wasn't really expecting.
They certainly weren't the biggest loser, but I feel like just the team, like in terms of where they're at, I mean, they're already Super Bowl contenders in my opinion, but considering like just adding the rookies to even bolster that depth, they didn't get him on the offensive line. I think that was crucial for the teams jumping from division leader to actual Super Bowl contender. So that kind of fell short there.
Yeah, and I don't have too much to add here, but I mean, you bring up a great point. Both of you guys brought up great points about how the receivers, they probably should have got at least one receiver, maybe two receivers. But like you said, Roman, three is just a lot when you already got a nice duo in Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, and the offensive line too. That was a concern last year, and they didn't address that at all. They added a lot to their defense, which is already a really, really good defense. So maybe it's even better defense, but maybe they just think that that Goff was the sole problem of the offense. So now that you take Goff out and put Stafford in, you don't have any issues anymore. But Stafford's another guy. I mean, yeah, I know we like to talk about in Detroit. Yeah, he's tough and he plays through anything. He's a guy that gets hurt a lot too, so he gets banged up. So you want to get a good offensive line around him, and the fact they didn't do that is definitely a concern. But yeah, I also kind of agree with Chris. This wasn't like a team that I thought had a brutal draft, but upon further delving into it, I realized maybe they are a tough team. I think maybe, Roman, you're just doing some more. You're a little bitter too that they have Stafford now too, and you want to throw some hot shots at him. But, but yeah, I agree. It's not they didn't really. It wasn't awful, but they also didn't really address their glaring need, which was the offensive line. But I think Tutu Atwell could be an interesting player.
There was no bias in this pick. I was just simply looking at the draft boards, and I don't think many teams had awful F grade drafts, but I think in terms of like actually filling needs, they fell short of that. That's
I think this is the draft that's hardest to tell. We're really not going to be able to tell anything because of the lack of college season last year, all the opt-outs. There was really no combine. It's going to be really tough to grade this draft, I think, until the next couple years. So, but yeah.
I'll give you since we didn't really get any of the big losers, I'll give you a couple honorable mentions with my actual pick, which is more of maybe their draft wasn't the actual worst in the draft class, but I want to trash them anyway because they always draft like losers. But the Green Bay Packers are the first honorable mention, and that's just because it's kind of a pairing with the Aaron Rodgers news. Plus, I think they reached on both the first and second round picks. Stokes, I think, was a little bit of a reach at the corner position, and then taking Myers at center, I think he was also a reach. I do really like the Amari Rodgers pick, so that definitely makes up for it, and the reason why I didn't make them my biggest loser, I guess. The other one would be the New Orleans Saints. I really just don't think they did a lot in the draft. I think Peyton Turner was a massive reach. I was seeing some stuff about him getting some first round buzz, and there wasn't a single thing about him actually being a good player. It was that he had good character, and then he's a hard worker and stuff. It had nothing to do with his actual ability. It was all about his intangibles. So I think taking that in the first round was a definite reach. And then also coming around and taking one of my least favorite quarterback prospects ever in Ian Book, who I think has zero talent on his entire body. I think he's terrible. Was a waste of a pick. I know he's not a starting quarterback. I just think taking him in the fourth round is a waste of a pick. He should have been an undrafted free agent, but it is what it is. He won a lot of games in Notre Dame, but I don't think he has any actual talent in the NFL, or he will ever be anything in the NFL. So those two teams, honorable mentions. Probably
tell us how you really feel, Chris. Jeez,
the Saints were probably my least favorite draft in the entire class, but I want to trash this team because they always make a bad pick in the first round, and that's the Las Vegas Raiders taking Alex Leatherwood, a massive reach at offensive line when there was probably 5 offensive linemen I would have taken over the pick. They did address a major need there, but clearly the wrong pick. And then getting Morig in the second round was a good pick as well. So this draft wasn't actually absolutely terrible. It was just the fact that the Raiders are the worst team in terms of drafting in NFL right now. The last 4 or 5 years, I feel like they reach on a player that nobody thinks has any chance of going in the first round. And they are the team that's like, oh, this is a good pick. Let's take him. We're so much smarter than everybody else. We got rocket scientists on our team. We should add Matt Patricia to this awesome coaching staff.
You don't want to.
I think this team, I think the Raiders, I don't know why Aaron Rodgers has any interest going to this team, because this is one of the most inept franchises in terms of their front office. It's a team that traded Khalil Mack, in my opinion, pretty much so far for nothing. They really haven't gotten anything out of that trade despite getting multiple first-round picks. And I think this Raiders team has had the opportunity to, seize the moment with all these picks, really improve. They've had multiple really high picks. They have a decent roster now. They've made some okay signings in free agency, but they just have continued to swing and miss on their first-round picks. And I think Leatherwood is going to be the next in line of another underperforming first-round pick compared to his adversaries that they could have gone with. So I don't know, man. I'm kind of done with the Raiders right now. I think their front office is a joke. I think Gruden is a joke as well. So, I mean, the Raiders, I'm going to be pretty low on them going into this season unless they get Aaron Rodgers. They didn't really do a whole lot. The receiving corps is still terrible. Their whole offensive line was revamped, and they're reaching on players like Leatherwood when there's multiple quality first-round grade linemen on the board still. So, to me, it's not that their draft was absolutely miserable this year. It was just the fact that they have just continued to just waffle their first round picks on players that I just have no expectations going in the first round. So that coupled with this mediocre draft is the reason why they are my biggest losers of this year.
Yeah, I had Alex Leatherwood going in the first round in some of our mocks, but that was definitely towards the back end, not 17. So definite reach there. They did pull it back with the Trayvon Moehrig pick, who they traded up to get. I think that was a good pick. They did take 3 safeties in this draft, so
Yeah, that
maybe
too.
maybe maybe they don't trust Jonathan Abrams, who surprise was a first round pick. So I think it's definitely a concern there. Obviously, the Packers took Cleveland Farrell at 4. They got Colton Miller in the first round a year before that, I believe, who hasn't really done much so far, and obviously Josh Jacobs has been good, so you can't really fault him for that. But this pick has been all over the board, and even last year there was concerns about was Ruggs actually the best wide receiver in the class?
No.
I didn't think he was, and it's just
Definitely not.
It's just interesting to see that they're actually building up a track record now of confusing picks. So.
Yeah, they also got Arnett last year too in the first round, I believe.
He was a massive reach.
Yeah, and Ruggs too. I mean, like you said, he wasn't good last year, quite frankly. So, yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry, Drew. I will advocate for the Packers a little bit because you did bring him as an honorable mention. Eric Stokes is a very speedy guy, and yes, he was a reach, but you also have to remember Eric King or Kevin King was not fast, and he got burned by Scotty Miller. So I think if Eric Stokes was in that situation, he would not let that happen. So I think they needed a speed corner to pair up with Jair Alexander, and I think Stokes was the guy. And obviously Amari Rodgers, I think we all like him.
Yeah.
But besides that, it was very. I mean, I could easily tell like you're in a situation with Aaron Rodgers. You got to make him happy. Surely you have to take a first round wide receiver at this point, and then he didn't. So I'm like, oh well, he's definitely gone now. But
yeah.
And considering that they even won Justin Jefferson last year, and they didn't even help him out again in the first round, I think it's just really funny. But I think Rodgers was a decent pick. I think Stokes could pan out, but yes, it could have been a reach.
I think the Packers are more in the Rams conversation where there wasn't a ton of losers, so you could look at them. I don't think they had an awful draft, but yeah, I think it's more in that range. But going back to the Raiders, I think after this draft, I mean, they are putting a lot of their chips into what happens to Aaron Rodgers. Because I think if he goes to the Raiders, I think you can make an argument that they're the second best team in that division. If he goes to the Broncos, I think they're clearly the fourth. They're the worst team in that division, I think, behind the Chargers, the Broncos. Yeah. And the Chiefs. So there's a lot riding on where Aaron Rodgers ends up. So yeah, overall that first round pick, that was the one. Like, I think I'm pretty sure on the ESPN draft coverage, it was just like silence because they got it, they took him, and everyone was kind of just like, what? And even if you do look at the video too, I don't know if this might have been a mistake, but it looks like Leatherwood thinks he's being pranked when he's getting the call that he got drafted. Like he's kind of like he's kind of like confused, and he's like, oh man. So it might have just been, I might just be reading between the lines, but a few other people kind of thought the same thing I did, where he's getting the call and it looks like he thinks he's being pranked, and he's like, wait, I'm going 17th overall, what? Yeah, and I think, like you said, Roman, we did have him going in the first round at some of our mocks, but it was towards the latter half, and it was when guys like Jenkins, even like Cosme and Darisaw, obviously too, that were already off the board when Leatherwood went. So yeah, just again, very confusing pick there by the Raiders. And yeah, it's really going to, as we said at the top of the show, where Aaron Rodgers ends up, it's really going to, especially for the Raiders and the Broncos, it's really going to impact how that team goes. I think the Broncos, if they don't get Aaron Rodgers, I think they're the third best team in that division. They just need to upgrade their quarterback position somehow, but then the rest of their team is really good. The Raiders, though, there's a lot of question marks. It was all across the board. But yeah, I think the Raiders were definitely a loser. I think a lot of people thought that as well. Anything you guys wanted to add here before we close out the show?
No, I'm obviously very excited to see how these drafts pan out. We can give them all the grades and winners and losers in the world, but we won't truly know until these guys hit the field next fall. So I'm very excited to see what guys prove us wrong, what guys prove us right, and how this class shakes out.
And it's time to get the 2022 board, right?
Yeah.
Get that draft board ready.
Start our mock draft tomorrow.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, like this year's draft was a little more normal than last year's draft. Hopefully, next year's draft is fully normal. But yeah, I want to say real quick before we close out, though, thank you to everyone that followed along with the draft with us through the first round on our Twitter account. That was awesome. We got a lot of good feedback, good comments, good interaction through that, and Roman did some second round and third round coverage as well. So thank you everyone that checked that out. But yeah, that'll do it for this episode. Once again, we're the Zone Defense Podcast. The NFL draft is over, but we also have a bunch of NFL previews, division previews, fantasy rankings, mock drafts, all that stuff for the 2021 season. And then Chris and I also are going to continuing our weekly Zone Defense Basketball Hour as the NBA playoffs are right around the corner. Things are really heating up there. So be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and search us on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a thing. Smash that like button and drop a comment down below. Let us know your winners and losers of the NFL draft, as well as where you think Aaron Rodgers is going to end up, or if he's going to end up as the host at Jeopardy. We'd love to read those comments and respond to as many as we can as soon as possible. But that'll do it for this episode. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
See ya.